So that last video was supposed to be just an intro clip where I could add that second part of the Psychosis video, but I talked for too long, so it's actually an interlude video, and this is my introduction to the Psychosis video, which I hope won't be very long. It's part 2, and I'm hoping to get the scary stuff out of the way and sort of say goodbye to the fear of these kind of states. And I guess one of my biggest fears is the story. She went off her meds and then she killed herself. And that was the story I was fearing when I was in that state 2.5 years ago, because I had gone off my meds with my doctor's help, and then I was in that scary state. And I was afraid of that story. And now I'm off my meds again. It's been 10 days. And I'm again a little afraid of that story, and I'm watching myself be afraid of that story, experiencing it in the past, so there's extra scariness there. And when I was editing that video, I had sort of the insight of not to separate myself from death. And maybe that is actually speaking as death in a way, speaking as the ego dying. And I talk about speaking as life and not separating oneself from life, but then one can't really separate oneself from death either. And I remember Krishnamurti saying, life is death is love. And that's really hard to wrap one's brain around. And so I feel like one can't have love if not in touch with this death, because one has to die to all one's past ego elements in order for love to be. So that could actually be what this process is in a way. And Krishnamurti talks a lot about death and how death is not separate from life. And there's actually a passage by him in, I think, his notebook that talks about death, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but just a bit of it, where it's a little out of context if I start where I'm starting, but basically he's driving along and then he says, everything was there except the brain, though it was driving the car. Everything had become so intense, there was death, not because the brain was quiet, not because the beauty of the land or the light on the clouds or the immovable dignity of the mountains. It was none of these things, though all these things may have added something toward it. It was literally death, everything suddenly coming to an end. There was no continuity. The brain was directing the body and driving the car, and that was all. Literally, that was all. The car went on for some time and stopped. There was life and death, so closely, intimately, inseparably together, and neither was important. Something shattering had taken place. And to me, that really resonates with that sense in something that might be called psychosis. But the difference is there's an extreme fear of it. And so all those fears come in, whereas this passage shows that there was no fear of this incredible, immense ending, which for me, there is fear of that. And that fear actually makes it worse, and it makes it something that it's not. So to continue with the bit, there was no deception or imagination. It was much too serious for all that kind of silly aberration. It was not something to play about. Death is not a casual affair, and it would not go. There was no argument with it. You can have a lifelong discussion with life, but it's not possible with death. It's so final and absolute. It wasn't the death of the body. That would be a fairly simple and decisive event. Living with death was quite another matter. There was life and there was death. They were inexorably united. It wasn't a psychological death. It wasn't a shock that drove out all thought, all feeling. It wasn't a sudden aberration of the brain, nor a mental illness. It was none of these things, nor a curious decision of the brain that was tired or in despair. It wasn't an unconscious wish for death. It was none of these things. These would be immature and so easily connived at. It was something in a different dimension. It was something that defied space-time description. It was there, the very essence of death. The essence of self is death, but this death was the very essence of life as well. In fact, they were not separate, life and death. This was not something conjured up by the brain for its comfort and ideational security. The very living was the dying, and the dying was the living. In the car, with all the beauty and color, with all the feeling of ecstasy. Death was part of love, part of everything. Death wasn't a symbol, an idea, a thing that one knew. It was there in reality, in fact, as intense and demanding as the honk of a car that wanted to pass. As life would never leave, nor can be set aside, so death now would never leave or be put aside. It was there with an extraordinary intensity, with a finality. All night one lived with it. It seemed to have taken possession of the brain and the usual activities. Not too many of the brain's movements went on, but there was a casual indifference about them. There was an indifference previously, but now it was past and beyond all formulation. Everything had become much more intense, both life and death. Death was there on waking, without sorrow, but with life. It was a marvelous morning. There was a benediction which was the delight of the mountains and the trees. And there's one more bit, and I'm just reading these two. Add a different dimension to this fear of death that really happens in these states. And this other bit is, to observe death is to observe life. You understand, sirs? We have neither observed living nor are we capable of observing death. When you know how to observe living with all its complexities, with all its fears, despairs, agonies, aching sorrow, loneliness, boredom, when you know how to look at it, not whether you like it or dislike it, whether it gives you pleasure or no pleasure, but just observe, then you will be capable of observing death, because then there is no fear. So to die is to live, but we do not know how to die to everything every day, to all of the things that we have learned, to all the things that we have gathered as character and so on. In something that continues in time, there is nothing new. It is only when there is an ending that there is something new. But you see, we are frightened to end everything that we know. Have you ever tried to die to one of your pleasures? That is good enough to begin with. To end without reason, without argument. That is what is going to happen when death comes to you. There is no argumentation with death. In the same way, if you know how to die to one of your pleasures, to the smallest and to the greatest, then you will know what it means to die, because death is a most extraordinary thing. Death means renewal, a total mutation, in which thought does not function at all, because thought is old. But when there is death, there is something totally new. So that was also by Krishnamurti, and really saying that this death is a renewal. And I think the important thing for me to remember when this comes upon me again is the trouble is the fear of death, or the fear of this mutation state. And I've talked a lot about this transformation state and all of that, but it's really a death of sorts, and no wonder the ego and the brain interprets it as death and as literally dying. But it's death, and it's not the death of the body, but it is a type of death. And what he's pointing to in this is that that's the only way something new can come into being. So I just want to add that in. Again, not my words, Krishnamurti, getting with this whole idea of this process as a type of death, and it sure as heck feels like that. So I will add in that clip and add in the little commentary, and hopefully I can stop talking to myself or worrying about death and just be new to the next encounter with it, if there is such a thing. And maybe I'll capture that on video, and maybe it'll just be this encounter and then a renewal and moving on with life. Went to the washroom.
Yep. Perfectly fine. Now you're gonna eat something. There you go.
So I already wrote this. I said, are we supposed to move to new? is that I want to be close to my family. Today's February 20th, right?
Hmm.
They're all still alive right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see them, but I know I can't right now. Because it's the middle of the night. It's 3:27 on February 20th. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I know. They were alive yesterday. It says yesterday. Said that look on your face when you lift your leg to fart, then you shit your pants. It's almost like they know what I'm capable of. So it's 3:28 in the morning. I want to text my mom. Do you think I should?
What do you want to say to her? What if you wake her up? Do you want to wake her up? She's still here.
I want to say, that I love her, and she texted me on Saturday. I told her, this song makes me think of when I was a little girl enjoying listening to you play the organ as I fell asleep and stayed awake to hear you play just a bit more before drifting off. I love. And she said, oh, that's so cute.
Are you cold?
I'm just shaking.
Yeah, why are you shaking, man?
So much violence. What are you thinking about?
About your note.
Well, the reason I'm still here, sometimes I forget, is to stand up for people with mental health challenges. Because I definitely have that. I thought I could go medication free. I think I can, but I don't know about right now. I don't know what to do. I feel like part of me wants to go back and live with my family, but like in the basement suite at 120, so we can all be there. Tomorrow's the day. I can't leave this world now. I thought maybe it was time to. Last night when I was watching you type, and you thought I was sleeping, I realized that this is what happens to homeless people. They just take this posture and they can't move. That's why they're sitting there like this. Not because they want to, but because they're lost souls. I don't know. And then we all walk by them. I don't want to die homeless. I'm really thankful for this food. It is making me feel a bit better, but it's not the answer. to just give people a little bit of food. If this is how they feel on the inside, if they feel like thankful for the little bit of food, being cold, and still starving for love. Okay. I failed to fake my own death. Um, So I just finished editing in the text commentary, and of course that's not all of it. I will say I was in extreme agony and anguish the entire time that I thought could only be relieved with death, and that I also equated with feeling like a homeless person on the street and the extreme pain of that. And also just seeing myself say that the reason I'm still here, sometimes I forget, is to stand up for people with mental health challenges. And I say, because I definitely have that. And I was saying that because 3 weeks before I had come off my meds with the help of my psychiatrist, and then I was re-experiencing this state of consciousness of extreme fear and terror. And I even said, I thought I could go medication free, and I think I can, I just don't know about right now. So I did go back on the meds, and I was on them for the last 2.5 years, and now I'm at a point where I'm 10 days off the meds. So there's still that fear that that same kind of scene could repeat itself after a 3-week point or something, and I really hope it doesn't, but it was good to reconnect with that. And another point is the whole time I didn't want to end my life at all, but it was just such pain that it seemed like the only option. But I was able to stay with the pain, and that sort of moved through me, and it was translated into a bit of a conversation with myself out loud, but there was definitely way more going on inside me than I actually gave voice to, partially because I might have been afraid to be judged or carted off to the psych ward with some of the things I might have said. So I was in this internal struggle of really trying to figure things out, and the little bits I did say were indications of what I was trying to figure out inside. And really it was about how people are just starving for love, and the comment I made about faking my death is related to feeling like I have to fake my death, and I don't know how that works, but that happened the very first time I was in the state. I asked a friend to help me fake my own death, because I thought if everyone thought I was dead, I would go on to a different version of reality of myself that probably wouldn't include the people I love, but they would go on living their life without me, and I would go on in my life in like this other version that I was meant to transcend into, that seems like this parallel reality that's always there. And I feel sometimes like if I do die, I just sort of wake up from a bad dream of this life and wake up in my same kind of body, in the same kind of life, but it's completely different, and I don't remember anything, or I just sort of wake up as me but with absolutely no memory. And that sort of runs parallel with my life a bit, because my memory is so bad that sometimes I feel like I might just wake up with no memory, yet still have a sense of who I am. So there's a lot there. It's not just about suicide or something. It's all kind of symbolic, and a lot of it could be due to these symbolic things trying to communicate with us about what it's like to transcend the ego or transcend something, and I don't really know what that is. I really can't speak to that too much, but it's more of something that one is in contact with when in that state, and it's a lot of information and it's a lot to sort out in a short period of time, and during that period of time I feel like I might just end my life because it's too much to take, too much pain, too much complexity, too much everything. So it wasn't that I wanted to, it was just, can I figure this out before I do end my life, before I figure this out? It's this really bizarre state, and that's one of the reasons why I carry a Zap strap, because it buys me time. If I get scared, I can keep myself somewhere kind of safe, my body safe, and even if it's so terrifying inside, it's something I don't want to figure out, I have to figure it out, because I can't end my life before I figure it out. So it's this weird state. It's totally weird. And the other thing about reading the Krishnamurti quotes, it's not to say that I understand what the heck he's even talking about or saying, because what he's pointing to is something very profound that I don't even know where to begin with that, and I don't know if I understand or whatever, but I'm just pointing to myself, creating pointers to myself to coach myself through some of the scary stuff that might come back, because it did come back 3 weeks after being off meds last time, and it could come back again. So really using that to coach myself, not saying that I'm trying to say that that state that I was in or a state that I might go into is anything like he's talking about. It's just trying to be a coach to myself, because there's really nothing else out there. There's no coach to help you get through this kind of transformation, this kind of death, and be with some of the ugliness of that, and almost be like a midwife. How if a mother's going to have a baby, she has somebody she can call when it is happening to coach her through. Well, I don't have someone to call to coach me through when I have this state of terror and extreme pain and anguish that translates into embodied experiences like I'm homeless, and if I feel like I'm homeless, I might want to end my life because it's so painful, and there's just so much pain, and allowing that pain to speak instead of translating that pain speaking into, well, you have a mental illness, it might be something that can be moved through, like I was able to move through it that night. But 2 days later, my friend wasn't with me, he left, and that's when that bottle of beet kvass exploded, which was so scary. And that might have actually been before that, and then I did get through that night, and then my friend stayed with me after that, and then a day or two later he wasn't there, and then I was just in a terrified state and I ended up in the hospital. So I can't remember the exact order, but it seems like in these states when one is so terrified, like death is right there, whether by one's own hand or by some kind of external circumstances, everything in life points to that, like the text messages people send, and friends that never send me scary or odd text messages start sending these scary messages and things, not on purpose, but it just seems to go with the level of consciousness, and the level of consciousness creates. So in that state, everything that comes at me, even through the usual people I'm in contact with, is scary, and it's more than beyond chance in terms of the amount of the scary stuff coming through normal interactions is not just a matter of interpreting regular stuff as scary, but it's actually more scary stuff. And it seems like that state is just really provoking one to actually go through it and be with it and not try to escape it. Because it would be nice if I'm in that state and someone sends me texts about clouds and rainbows and then I feel better. But it doesn't happen that way. People are sending it about crapping one's pants, which can happen at death, or somebody sent this other kind of scary one about this scary movie, and then this other stuff, and then the bottle exploding, and feeling like a homeless person, and all these things. And it just really, I think, provokes one to just go really into it and not be able to escape. And while in that state, I'm trying to play nice songs to remind me of my mom and like get myself through that terrifying process of experiencing some of the most terrifying states of consciousness that a human being can experience, but without the external effects, such as actually living homelessness or actually living through a war or whatever. But if somebody lives through that, it's recorded in consciousness, and that can be picked up on by other people at different times that are unrelated to actual events in the current reality, because consciousness is non-local, it's non-linear, it's something we all share. And so, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to go on and on about that. Maybe I will talk more about that, but again, with that whole suicide feels like faking one's own death. From my perspective, it would feel like faking my own death because I have a sense that something else goes on, or I move to a parallel reality, which sounds really messed up, but then everyone I know and love experiences me as dead, but I go on to a different reality where I don't know what that is because I haven't actually gone there yet. But so for me, I feel like I'm going to fake my own death, but really it would actually be death and then something else, and maybe I would just be dead, and maybe the faking my death is a trick to get me to end my life. I really don't know how it works, but there's this sense of needing to get out of this, and maybe that even comes from not wanting to go back to the mental health paradigm, or not wanting to go into the mental health paradigm to begin with, or feeling like one won't be received in a safe way and be able to live the life one wants to live. And that was part of the fear, was I was off meds and I realized I'm not going to be able to live the life I wanted to live. I'm going to have to go back on these meds and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, there was a lot in there, and standing up for people with mental health challenges. And I hope through my dialogue with myself, I've done some of that, not by saying, oh, it's okay, don't stigmatize yourself, but actually translating it into other possibilities and giving permission to others to translate it into their own possibilities, not the possibilities I've translated for myself. That's only a small portion of what I could have created for myself as me. So other people can create whatever they want for themselves as them, and things like that. And yeah, so. And also I realized when I said that bit about how can we wrap our head around life is death is love, that Krishnamurti says. And I wrote, life, death, and love wrap themselves around our brain. We don't have to wrap our head around it. So the last point is that when there's that fear state that feels like death, there's still ego elements that are judging that fear and that state, and that judge is translating it into, well, what could this mean? That could mean I'm going to die, or that could mean someone's going to kill me, or that could mean I'm going to kill myself, because it's just that scary. So that fear of feeling like one is dying, which could just be that death as Krishnamurti describes it, or something similar, the ego comes in and says, well, that means this and that means that, and that creates the fear, instead of just being with that pain and that ending and that, it's just something that is so immense and feels so awful, but there's some kind of renewal in that. And there's even something to be said about, I had that experience that was February of 2015, then I had one in October of 2015. Both times went to the hospital, came out fine, and then had my scary experience in the hospital in April of 2016. And before that, I was actually doing really well, and in March, I did a little stand-up comedy routine. So I'm going to share that in my next video, and some of the positive things that I was able to do through the mental health system that I don't think I've talked too much about. So angry letters, scary psychosis video. Next is the positive stuff, and I'll probably do that kind of in a short way because there's a lot of great stuff, but people can easily find that just by virtue of being in the mental health system. So that's why I tried to keep my dialogue with myself more on the outskirts, because there's so much information about all the great stuff, and everyone's saying come and join our mental illness recovery party. And so I don't really think I need to put too much energy into that, but I'm very grateful for all of that, and I'm grateful for having the bad experience and then wanting to move towards moving away from this. And hopefully I can keep that movement going, and hopefully that will keep going, and I won't be afraid of this energy if it comes back. And maybe I will be, and we shall see. Maybe I'll have to use the zap strap. Maybe I'll have to ask someone here to just hold me, and maybe I'll have to hold myself. Maybe I'll just have to be with it. And yeah, I really hope that all the great experiences I did have before things started to happen in such a way that was telling me to move away from the mental health system, I hope those moments spoke for themselves and don't really require further elaboration. And I hope that I can live in a way that is again my truth, just living the moment and not having to speak in a reaction to some bad moments. But that's not entirely true, because a lot of what I've spoken about is good, and harvesting my mania and harvesting a lot of different things throughout the year. So it's just a mixture of everything. And yeah, time to wrap it up.